Greetings. This is TK Trav, aka Travis Magus, here with LVX777. Surprise, surprise. We will now continue our study on the Magician by W.E. Butler. So first and foremost, if you can hear the sound of my voice, let me know if the audio is clear. Let me know. How are we doing with that? Zach M. Peace. Useless Familiar. Peace. Welcome. High Chronicles, peace, peace. Your friend attends, peace and welcome. Aldiki, peace, good to see you. We're about to begin. So, we left off with the study of section number 3. The magical keys. WVT, peace, greetings, good to see you. We are dealing with the magical keys. Part 3. We're going to get into magnetism. We're going to talk about the Tattwas. You guys should remember about the Tattwas, right? We're going to talk about the body of light, and quite possibly we're also going to get into the magical personality. So without too much further ado, we're going to get started with this book study. Hope you're keeping warm on this ice-cold January evening. Shout out to all my people across the world. Let's get started. Let's get cracking. Veronica Archaga, peace. Always great to see your name. Richard Tracy, good evening, my brother. Good evening. All right. Who's ready for some magical occult study? Richard Tracy comes in with the Bobby Hemmett quote. Now it's time to get down to the real funky shit. Amen, amen. Shout out to Bobby Hemmett. Everybody loves the good brother. Timon, peace. Good evening. Veronica Archaga says, I'm so happy I'm here in my world of magic. That's good to hear. Good to hear. Real funky shit. All right. As I mentioned on my live stream, I've been having quite the technical difficulties. So, on this little burner phone here, I'm not too sure if the book is clear enough for you to see, but this is what we got to work with right now. We'll get back up to speed. No worries. As my dad told me in a crucial time Tough times don't last, but tough people do. So we're about to last. Amen, amen. Ashley B, peace, good evening. Fellow cyclomate. Alligator the Greater, peace, peace. I hope you're having a good evening. All right, let's get to it. Let's get to it. Always a pleasure to be in the company of my spiritual brothers and sisters here. I love you guys, and I mean that. So let's do it. Let's do it. Chapter 14, Magnetism. And by the way, if you are excited about this content and are happy to be here, go ahead and smash that like button. It helps. I was listening to the people at YouTube talk, and they said, when you think about the algorithm, don't think about some blind machine, some set of numbers. Replace the word algorithm with audience, right? Replace the word algorithm with audience. And I thought that was pretty insightful. It's better to think of this as dealing with people as opposed to dealing with numbers. Sunshine Chick, peace and greetings. Sunshine Chick says, I thought the book read was abandoned. No, not abandoned. Not abandoned. I just had to get right. Had to take some time to get myself together. All right, let's go. Chapter 14, Magnetism. As we have said elsewhere, the term magnetism is an unfortunate one when we are considering the subtle force, which is one of the principal factors in magical work. The use of the word comes from the experimental work of the followers of Dr. Mesmer, and though they did attempt to make it clear that the subtle energy which, according to their philosophy, permeated the whole universe was not the phenomenon which the scientists term magnetism. The misuse of the word has persisted up to the present day. The Mesmerists termed this subtle force animal magnetism, since they stated it was the power which accompanied physical magnetism, but which was also found in all living things. At a later date, the German Baron von Reichenbach studied the subject exhaustively, and his findings have much of value for the practical magician. As far as it has been possible for the present writer to check his results, they appear to be correct. And as they certainly enter into all magic work, it may be helpful if we give here a general outline of them. Briefly, von Reichenbach stated that there was a force which, without being identifiable with them, yet seemed to underlie the physical forces of electricity, magnetism, light, and heat. To this force, he gave the name of Ode. Through his researches, he came to the conclusion that this odic force was, as he put it, the odic garment of the universe, present everywhere, but manifesting most strongly in certain things. Such things are the light radiations from the stars and the sun, all crystalline bodies, permanent magnets and electromagnets, chemical action of all kinds, and most important of all, living, vegetable, animal, and human organisms. Ghost Panther 22, peace. Ghost Panther says, what was his name? Baron what? Baron von Reichenbach. That's Reichenbach. What a fancy name, eh? In some magical lodges, a great deal of experimental work has been done upon this particular subject, and we may here indicate some of the conclusions reached. It must be remembered that thousands of experiments have been made and the results tabulated in the lodge archives. Dr. Rhine and his followers are not the only or even the first workers in this field. All living animal forms appear to have two vertical definite poles, to use the magnetic term. The right side of the body is of one polarity, and the left side of the reverse odic polarity. There is also a horizontal polarity, the upper part of the body being of one polarity, and the lower half of the opposite polarity. The same applies to living vegetable forms. Does this sound familiar? Does this sound like anything you've heard of before? The vibrations of sound have the power of liberating the odic force, and combustion, which is, of course, a form of chemical action, does the same. Alicia M., peace. Cosmic Traveler, peace. All substances radiate their own quality of odic force, as do also all electrical manifestations. In connection with this latter, a very interesting series of experiments was made at the Theosophical Research Center using the clairvoyant faculty of one of the members, Mr. Jeffrey Hodgson. It was found that he could correctly indicate when a current of electricity was flowing in a wire placed before him, the push button controlling the current being actuated by someone in another room. It is of interest to note that it was the sensations experienced by a bishop of the Protestant Episcopal Church in America when, even in total darkness, he accidentally touched anything made of brass, which led to investigations by Professor Buchanan and Dr. Denton into the phenomenon now known as psychometry. In certain magical work, use is made of the breath of the operator, and in the Catholic ritual used every year for the consecration of the holy oils, the bishop and his attendant priests breathe over the oils in the sign of the cross. This particular use of the breath, apart from the symbolism as explained by theologians, is based upon the fact that the breath is strongly charged with the odic energy. Aiden Serato, peace. But the whole body radiates this energy, as we've seen, and the odic field of force around every person has received the name of the health aura, since its appearance indicates to the trained seer the health conditions of the physical body. Vital energy of all types is drawn into the etheric body and specialized for use therein. The surplus is radiated out and forms an energy field around the body. The late Dr. Kilner, by the use of the dicyanine screens, who's ever seen research on these dicyanine screens? I've seen that there's a lot of TikTok videos about how these experiments were done with this glass, and different things were able to be observed, and how it was subsequently banned from use. But he says the late Dr. Kilner, by the use of the dicyanine screens, observed and recorded the health indications given by the etheric aura, as this field of living force is called. And by the way, if you don't know, as far as these dicyanine screens go, apparently this was something that was discovered and created during one of the early wars. I think it was Vietnam, when they were attempting to make night vision, and there were certain forms of energy that was reported to be able to be seen, aka spirits and auras and things like that. I think they said at one point they had a bunch of people using them in helicopters, and the army began shooting and firing upon themselves because they saw demons floating around the helicopters. I don't know, you have to check the TikTok stories. But it is true that they used these screens decades ago, but then they stopped for some strange reason. Ghost Panther says, how do you spell that? I'm sorry, I'm slow, so I can look it up on TikTok. Yeah, dicyanine, so it's, where is it? Dicyanine, dicyanine. I've got a pair. Or I should say my cousin has a pair. But I think that they don't sell like the original ones anymore. I'm sure if you have enough money, you could find them. It has been established that the auric fields of human beings tend to affect each other in various ways. Some auras unite easily with certain other auras, but are strongly repellent to others. Since such attraction and repulsion induces certain subconscious and conscious reactions, it is essential that the operators in a magical ceremonial should be magnetically in harmony, as the blending of their auras is one of the foundations upon which the ceremony rests. Very important to do magical work with people who are on your same vibration. It is of interest to note in this connection that there are certain people whose auric energy seems to act as an enzyme or ferment. And in their presence, even opposing auras seem temporarily to blend. Such people are invaluable in lodge working, since the lodge phenomena work through such a blended aura. In another one of his books, W. Butler, called The Lords of Light, he gives a story about how in a magical lodge, you do have a bunch of people who are, very intelligent. They read all the books, they do all the practices. And then you have other people who are more on the sidelines, more in the background. They might not do a lot of talking, they might not do a lot of research, but they're still a part of the magical group. And he says that you can't judge a person within your lodge necessarily based on how much they do on the outside, because some of these people are the ones that carry this type of energy that helps to blend the rest of the people. In other words, you might have somebody that looks like they're doing the work, and that's great, and you might have other people who looks like they're not doing the work. But understand that just because you don't see it, that doesn't mean that they aren't contributing to the group. Many people are what's called stabilizers and harmonizers, and they do just that. They harmonize the energy and balance the forces that are being dealt with in the magical workings. I thought that was pretty interesting. Lords of Light, if you see that book, pick it up. It's a great one. Dr. Jedi Vampire God King, peace. Jaleel Cannon, peace. Jaleel Cannon asks, anybody know what book this is? I'd hope that most people know what book this is. I'd refer you to the title of the video. It's called The Magician, His Training and Work. Tien Pomeroy, peace. I hope all is well. I hope that you have good health and that everything is proceeding smoothly with you. Cha Edwin, peace. All right. They are of the greatest value in spiritualistic seances when their presence will often turn what would have been a failure into a successful sitting. It has been noted in this connection that many of these human enzymes are of the auburn and red-headed types. Yeah, so he goes into more detail on this in his other book, where sometimes he says that these people are often auburn and red-headed types. It is obvious that each individual brings his own unique potentialities into magical lodge and psychic circle alike, and the unfoldment of these powers and their interaction with the powers of others in the lodge not only opens up many possibilities, but also presents the lodge with new problems. It is true that the lodges have, through the centuries, built up a fairly comprehensive body of knowledge by means of which they can meet such problems. But at the same time, since these powers are emerging under modern conditions and new types of psychic makeup are coming into the lodges, there will always be forces and combinations of those forces which will tax the powers of the rulers thereof. It is important to remember that the operation of any power or force in the human personality has its subjective side, and the subjective expression of magnetism is emotion. Let me run that back. It is important to remember that the operation of any power or force in the human personality has its subjective side, and the subjective expression of magnetism is emotion. For purposes of the magician, magnetism and emotion are the same. So what does he mean by subjective? Well, if he's going to say subjective, we also have to look at objective, right? Now, the objective aspect of this force we call magnetism. So we're talking, and I said, does this sound familiar earlier? He's talking about prana, right? Notice how he said that there are two poles, one on the left side and one on the right side of the body, right? That's the Ida and the Pingala, right? So that's the magnetic force. If you have studied Franz Barton, Initiation into Hermetics and so on, he talks about this as well. I believe he calls it the magnetic fluid. Now, that's the objective aspect of this energy that we're working with. The subjective aspect, in other words, when it translates into your inner world, right? How do you work with, how do you move, how do you translate this energy? Well, it's going to be seen as emotion within you. Get it? So with that in mind, think about your dreams. Think about times where you may feel overwhelmed with emotion and you're not exactly sure why that's happening. It's because you are still dealing with this prana, with this magnetism, but it translates to your inner world through emotion. Yet this is also how you can manipulate this force. You can manipulate your emotions. If you don't want to feel a certain way, although it's more difficult at times or easier at times, working with your emotion is how you change the quality of this type of energy. Check. Stir the emotions and the magnetic flow increases. Induce the magnetic flow and emotions arise. Lovely. Lovely. Stir the emotions and the magnetic flow increases. Induce the magnetic flow and emotions rise. Peace, no face divination. This is very apparent in the relationship between the sexes. Indeed, a certain debased form of the tantric magic deliberately makes use of this for its own not very exalted purposes. And this not in the East alone. It will be noticed that we refer to the debased form of tantrika. This philosophic and occult system has also its heights as well as its depths, a point often forgotten by many occult students. In other words, if he's talking about a certain debased form of tantric magic, he's mostly talking about the stuff that you see on Facebook. Physical movements of a rhythmic type also tend to liberate magnetism, and certain forms of musical sound do the same. A lot of things should come to mind with this line here. Physical movements of a rhythmic type. Think about different physical movements of a rhythmic type that you might engage in, right? And he said that also combined with musical sound. So I'm thinking dance, right? And so many other things. Dr. Jedi Vampire God King says, this is a pulchritudinous book for Pluto shifting into Aquarius. Where did you dig up the word pulchritudinous? I need somebody to go look that up. Pulchritudinous. You just gave me a New Year's resolution to use pulchritudinous in a sentence. Okay, so physical movements of a rhythmic type also tend to liberate magnetism, and certain forms of musical sound do the same. Once more, stir the emotions and the magnetic flow arises. Induce the magnetic flow and emotions rise. I'd suggest you write that down or highlight that. It's simple, it's basic. I know you're going to remember it, but write that down. To the clairvoyant vision, The psychic atmosphere of a dance hall presents a most interesting spectacle, particularly when certain forms of music of Negroid Negroid origin. Listen at Butler. Hold on, let me go back. To the clairvoyant vision, the psychic atmosphere of a dance hall present a most interesting spectacle, particularly when certain forms of music of Negroid origin are used. Holy shit. Negroid origin. No way. Well, you gotta love the 50s and 60s, man, the 40s. So, can anybody think of any forms of music of Negroid origin that might be used to stir up some of these emotions, right? What type of music of Negroid origin could you imagine would do an excellent job at stirring up this tantric magnetic energy? Holy shit. There you go. No Face Divination says dance hall. That's the first thing. I mean, he said the word dance hall right there, right? This man is telling you need to get into some dance hall. You might need to go YouTube some Jamaican dance hall music and get that magnetism stirred up. Timon says jazz, dance hall. Right. Here we go. Ghost Panther 22 says yes, the movie Elvis, he goes to the dance hall where he meets Lil Richie. All right, y'all might need to get y'all some music of Negroid origin. I don't know if y'all sleeping on the music of Negroid origin, but you might need to check some of it out. It is clear that many people would seem to possess very little emotional force indeed. They appear to be, and often are, frigid, both in their everyday life and their sexual outlook. Psychologists know, however, that in many of these cases, the lack of emotional drive is the sign that the greater part of the emotional power of the personality has for some reason or other been locked up below the threshold of the conscious mind and is therefore not available for conscious use. Did anybody look up pulchritudinous yet? There we go. Richard Tracy says the definition of pulchritudinous: physically beautiful, comely. Oh. The methods of psychoanalysis disperse the repressed emotional forces and allow them to rise freely into consciousness, there to be integrated into the normal emotional circuit. Such a release of suppressed energy quickly restores normality, and the abnormal frigidity of body and mind disappears. In the magical lodge, this redirection of the emotional energies also takes place, partly due to the emotion-stirring ritual, and partly due to the inclusion of the individual in the general magnetic circulation of the lodge. Under the graded system of the Western lodges, as also under the guru-chela relationship existing in the East between the teacher and his pupil, or apprentice, this redirection of the emotional energy and its accompanying magnetism takes place gradually and under control. When, however, one is working alone, or with only one or two fellow workers, care has to be taken that the magnetic energy does not escape from control. There is, as a matter of psychic observation, a constant circulation which goes on in the finer bodies of man, and this process is easily affected by the mind. This mental control is exercised involuntarily and pathologically in the cases of suppression and mental dissociation, but it is part of the magical training for the aspirant to gain the power of conscious control of the magnetic energies. If these energies are aroused or liberated or increased, all perfectly valid lines of action, their corresponding mental channels and physical expression must be so directed and adjusted that the turbulent stream of energy may be safely diverted into the fertilizing irrigation channels instead of sweeping chaotically over all the mental and emotional field. In other words, when you are embarking upon magical work, spiritual work, you're going to be stirring up these energies. And it's going to be very wise to do your best to control and channel these energies in a useful way. Otherwise, they're just going to run chaotically throughout your mental and emotional field. This is what happens when you're ungrounded. This is what happens when you're ungrounded. Mark Podeny, peace. Mark says, man, this is perfect timing. Was just watching how bees fly with magnetism instead of aerodynamics. Interesting. Interesting. Again, and this is probably advice for myself, when, however, one is working alone or with only one or two fellow workers, care has to be taken that the magnetic energy does not escape from control. I think I'd have to admit that I let my magnetic energy kind of go haywire lately. But it's a learning process, indeed. Richard Tracy says, fertilizing irrigation channels in this context, can you expand a bit? Of course, I'm glad you asked. Now let's go back to that line. Where is it? Yeah, where is it? Was it on the previous page? Clear that many people would seem to possess very little emotional force indeed. They appear to be frigid. Emotional power. What in the world? Oh, there it is. Gotcha. Okay, so there is, as a matter of psychic observation, a constant circulation which goes on in the finer bodies of man, and this process is easily affected by the mind. This mental control is exercised involuntarily and pathologically in the cases of suppression and mental dissociation. But it is part of the magical training for the aspirant to gain the power of conscious control of the magnetic energies, right? And remember, the magnetic energies in the subjective plane are represented by your emotions, the astral force. If these energies are aroused or liberated or increased, their corresponding mental channels and physical expression must be so directed and adjusted that the turbulent stream of energy may be safely diverted into the fertilizing irrigation channels instead of sweeping chaotically over all the mental and emotional field. So yeah, he's most certainly talking about the chakras. He's talking about, remember how in the beginning of this book, he mentioned the lower three chakras, the survival need, the creative need, and the need to be in a group, right? To be a part of a herd, a part of a pack, or something of that nature. So those three forces are ruling the human body always. And as we begin to raise this energy, if those three primary needs are not stabilized, neutralized, taken care of, part of this chaotic expression in the mental and emotional field will be shown through those three primary needs needing to be solved. In other words, take care of yourself before your body forces itself to need to be taken care of. Anthony says, WTF, I thought you were white. This must be your first time here. How did you find this channel? Cosmic Traveler says, 3 nights ago you were live streaming in my dreams and sharing that bread of knowledge to others, and now you're here in the flesh. That's awesome. Keep up the good work. Maybe I was. Maybe I wasn't. Rachel Tracy says, I was thinking of the diagram on Dharana Darshan, chapter 9. I would certainly say that that is a way to do it, yes. Because what are you doing when you're doing those meditations of chakra shuddhi? You're recirculating that energy, that magnetic energy. Remember, he's talking about prana here. And again, if it isn't balanced, if it isn't neutralized, it will continue to seek to be solved. Sometimes in ways that are chaotic. Such enlarged and controllable channels are provided by the magical ritual if it is properly carried out. And for this reason alone, ritual magic can be a safer and more efficient method than any amount of Freudian psychoanalysis. As we've pointed out, the psychomagnetic flow of energy can be controlled by the mind. And in this way, the available magnetism may be increased not merely by the release of suppressed energies, but by an increase in the actual intake of those energies. So the psychomagnetic flow of energy can be controlled by the mind, and in this way, in the controlling of these energies by the mind, the available magnetism may be increased, right? That's how you increase your magnetism. That's how you increase your prana. That's how you increase your energy. Not merely by the release of suppressed energies, but by an increase in the actual intake of those energies. One of the methods, and when properly employed, one of the best, is the exercise which we have described more fully elsewhere, the key exercise of the interwoven light. Now, the personality of man receives energy from two sources. And one of these, elemental energy, flows through the etheric body. It is to be remembered that this magnetic force, though it has many effects upon the physical body, circulates in and through the etheric body. There are, of course, detectable electrical currents in the physical body, but this still more subtle force is not part of the physical forces, right? So the etheric body is not part of the physical body. Though its operation may be determined by the position and action of the physical vehicle, since the etheric body and the physical body are interlocked most closely. This is the basis of so many of the yogic asanas or postures. They determine the circuit in which the magnetic energies may flow. So when you're doing your yoga, when you're doing your asanas and your postures and your poses, understand that you're aligning your physical body into an energetic sigil. And that energetic sigil allows your etheric body to channel and to distribute and to intake a certain quality of prana. That's why they say you have to sit in a certain position. It will have been noticed that we have used a special term, elemental energy, to describe this subtle force. Now we're getting into the elemental stuff. Who's excited about that? I certainly am. This has been done for two reasons. It is the term used in the particular occult fraternity in which the present writer received much of his training, and by using the term, one covers all the various names, magnetism, odic force, prana, etc. Right? He then continues to say, there remain 2 points to be borne in mind by the magical apprentice. The first is that this elemental energy in one of its forms is the underlying pre-matter from which physical matter as we know it is condensed or materialized. It therefore equates with the prana of the Hindu systems. Many Western students, misled by some of the popular presentations of the Eastern systems of yoga, limit the term prana to that aspect of it which is utilized in the exercises of pranayama, or breathing control. But in the philosophy which underlies the yoga systems, the term prana is much more comprehensive. The earthly prana, which manifests in all the living beings and organisms found on Earth, is a modification of the solar prana, which in its turn is a modification of the cosmic prana, which is undifferentiated cosmic matter termed prakriti. Oh, check it out. Now we're getting some familiar terms, right? And by the way, the technical name of the etheric body is the pranamaya kosha. So that there gives a clue to how important this energy is dealing with the subtle body. It is the body composed entirely of prana. And by the way, what does he say about Prakriti? He says, this is more fully worked out in the Sanskrit work, the Shivagama, one chapter of which deals entirely with this energy and its modifications. So let me look on Amazon real quick and see if they have the Shivagama for sale. Peace, Anna Molly, welcome. Anybody find the Shivagama on Amazon? If not, I'm sure there's a PDF somewhere. I'll look that up later. All right, so let's go back. But in the philosophy which underlies the yoga systems, the term prana is much more comprehensive, right? It's more comprehensive than just pranayama. It's more than just breathing. Prana goes deep. It is what we call energy, all of it. The earthly prana, which manifests in all the living beings and organisms found on Earth, is a modification of the solar prana, right? So we've got the earthly prana, which is a modification of the solar prana, which in its turn is a modification of cosmic prana, which is the undifferentiated cosmic matter, also known as prakriti. Yes, yes. This is mentioned here in order to maintain the correct perspective in the student's mind. In one of the cryptic texts of the Sefer Yetzirah, it says that the 10th path, Malkuth, causes an influence to emanate from the Prince of Countenances, the angel of Kether, the highest point of the Tree of Life. In other words, by our actions in earthly matter and pre-matter, we are also acting on and reacting to the highest spiritual levels. As above, so below. As above, so below. What you're doing here has a reflected effect in Kether. Because one thing about Kabbalah, it often teaches that within Kether is Malkuth, and within Malkuth is Kether. All magical work must be seen in this perspective if the magical apprentice is to become anything more than a mere sorcerer, a meddler with occult forces. It is for this reason, and as a potent reminder of it, that the magician, during his operations, wears upon his breast what is known as the lamen. This is a symbol which represents the spiritual aspect of the work in which he is engaged, and it is by virtue of his spiritual intention that he asserts dominance and control over the creatures of the elements. To return to our consideration of the elemental energy, the key to its use is that it can be tied mentally to the breath, which in itself is said to be an expression of the dual energy of the eternal, the outbreathing and the inbreathing of Brahm. The actual exercises are simple and tedious. The ones which form the foundation of such control of prana are given in the next chapter. But, of course, there are many variants and specific adaptations of the basic exercises. Before the student attempts any of them, it is imperative that he learns to do them without any strain. This is the most important rule, and any infringement of it may lead to most unwelcome results. In practical training, therefore, the apprentice magician learns to release the body mechanism from the convulsive grip of the conscious mind. Let me run that back. In practical training, therefore, the apprentice magician learns to release the body mechanism from the convulsive grip of the conscious mind. Release the body from the conscious mind. This is done by the exercise known as the relaxation exercise. This will be found in the next chapter. Once control over the intake of the elemental energy has been obtained, such energy may be dealt with in various ways. It may be used within the student's own etheric and physical bodies, and very real self-healing may be brought about thereby. Or it may be directed outwardly onto people and things, producing very real effects thereby. If you've read cyclomancy, or if you've been a part of the cyclomancy class, you know that there are a couple of chapters that talk about how to channel this pranic force and exert it upon other people to influence them for health or mental influence or emotional influence. And of course, before knowing how to do that, you should be well versed in doing that upon yourself. When considering its use in the physical and psychic bodies, it should always be remembered that it is quite possible, if the student is careless or pays no attention to instructions, to disorganize seriously the subconscious psychological workings of the body. And many students have found this out to their cost. Undue concentration upon any one of the psychic centers or chakras should be avoided for this reason, if for none other. The great psychic centers lie close to and directly influence the endocrine or ductless glands, which play a great part in the chemistry of the body. To stimulate the centers in a balanced way is one thing. To disorganize the entire physical economy is quite another. What I'm picking up from that is maybe the goal shouldn't be to do a specific chakra exercise, right? Like, oh, I just want to meditate on my third eye and only my third eye. Maybe that isn't the wisest choice. Maybe the wiser choice is to be sure that you work on all the chakras in your chakra work, not paying special attention to one over the other. When the elemental energy is projected outward towards others or towards other objects, then it may be used for healing, for the spiritual illumination and initiation of those persons, or for hurt and deceptive illusion, according to the spiritual status and intention of the magician. These are, of course, the two poles of such activity. In practical experience, most of the magicians with whom we have come into contact seem to work somewhere between these two opposites, veering one way and the other as they react to their own inner nature. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Hazard Pie, peace, greetings. Hot and fresh off the rack. Although theoretically the elemental energy can be projected without any physical action, i.e. by mental effort alone, it has been found in practice that this projection is far more thorough and efficient when certain gestures and signs are employed. and certain definite thought forms are built up. The signs and sigils with which we dealt in section 2 of this book are all designed to act as vehicles for the elemental energy and may so be used. It is important that the magician keep ever before him the key idea that though he may draw down spiritual power from the heights, he must, if he is to give that power full expression, draw up from the earth soul that elemental force, which, as it ascends within him, changes its nature to manifestation from crude sex energy, as it passes through the center attributed by the Kabbalists to Yesod, to a radiating and harmonizing force as it passes through the center of Tefereth. So look, even as you're doing your work and you're pulling this energy down, right, you're manipulating the energy through the use of emotion, you're channeling it, you're creating your sigils, you're creating your thought forms, right? There should also be a transmutation of the earth energy, right? I think what happens, I can't speak for everybody, but I know a lot of people, when you start doing this kind of work, you start stirring up a lot of sexual energy. And although that energy can just be, expressed the way that it comes, it would be better to take that sexual energy and begin to transmute it, to bring it up from Yesod to the heart. I think that right there is another challenge. This harmonized energy may now be discharged into the mental forms which have been built. So in other words, you're pulling this energy up, and instead of just burning it away, you can push it towards your thought forms that you're working with. To go back to the question that Richard asked earlier, right? There was a line right here where he says, if these energies are aroused or liberated or increased, their corresponding mental channels and physical expression must so be directed and adjusted that the turbulent stream of energy may be safely diverted into the fertilizing irrigation channels, instead of sweeping chaotically over all the mental and emotional field. So this rise of sexual energy that's due to intense magical work should definitely be put to creative use. Again, this harmonized energy may now be discharged into the mental forms which have been built and will truly serve as an effective link between the spiritual forces invoked and the thought forms through which they manifest. Sly, peace. Lasange Descote, peace. Most thought forms partake of the nature of the sparks from the smith's anvil. These fly upwards for a foot or so and are extinguished. So most of the thought forms created by the average person never leave the aura of their creator. Ooh, that's tough. Let's go back. So get in your head an image of an anvil, right? And the blacksmith may be creating a sword, right? So it's like molten hot orange. And he's got this big ass hammer and he's slamming it down to shape the sword. And you see these sparks shooting up and then they dissolve. Most thought forms partake of the nature of the sparks from the smith's anvil. These fly upwards for a foot or so and are extinguished. So most of the thought forms created by the average person never leave the aura of their creator. Only when they have already been charged and vitalized by the elemental energy have they sufficient power to go forth. Check this out now. Most of the thought forms that you create never leave your aura because they're still feeding on you, right? They're still feeding on you because they don't have enough sustenance to be self-perpetuated, self-sustained. They don't have enough energy to be self-sustained, so they're still feeding on you. Interesting, right? Only when they have already been charged and vitalized by the elemental energy have they sufficient power to go forth. And in this connection, we would again repeat, emotion and magnetism go together. A long, continued emotional brooding over some problem will generate and charge some pretty effective thought forms. Uh-oh. Uh-oh. So, not only are you creating thought forms when you want to do magic, right? When you sit down and you concentrate and you create this thought form to do your thing. That's not the only time you're creating thought forms. You're creating thought forms every time you have repetition of emotional intensity. Anytime you're feeling something over and over and over again. Look what he says. A long, continued emotional brooding over some problem will generate and charge some pretty effective thought forms. Though such emotional brooding is usually employed in the wrong way, it can and must be used in a constructive, spiritual way by the aspirant to the magic of light. Lance Benefield, peace. Real funky shit. Hey, does this look familiar? Does anybody remember these things, these shapes? Of course, this isn't all of them. But these ought to be some familiar friends here. Jordan Parazik, peace. Chapter 15, the Tattvic tides. Whenever I read these books by the people associated with this particular magical group, I always love to hear what they say about the Tattwas, because this is that real elemental magic that serves as the bulk of the forces that we're working with. Elemental spirits. I can say confidently that most of us have only ever dealt with elemental spirits, and most of us probably won't deal with anything other than elemental spirits. So it serves, to me at least, to be very wise to learn as much as I can about the elemental forces. I remember Manly P. Hall saying something very interesting in his books about how oftentimes when people think that they're communicating with deities and gods, what they're really dealing with are elementals that are wearing the skin of a god, wearing the shape, the outfit, the shell. They call these psychic larvae. And it's easy to get scared and paranoid and automatically antagonistic about this, but take your emotions out of it. This is just how it works. Because again, like you said earlier, most of us create thought forms all day, every day, and they never leave us. And sometimes when we try to change gear, those thought forms wear a different mask because, like all living things, they need to feed, and they're gonna go where the food is. That's why it's so hard for some people to leave religion, because the thought forms that they've created still want to be fed, still want to eat. Thought forms are very tenacious. They don't just give up just because you decide you don't want to work with them anymore. They often just take a different shape. So you'll find that although some people want to change, if they don't change the emotions and the beliefs that are happening in the background, you're still working with the same entities you've always been working with. Me and my cousin have done quite a few experiments on the etheric and the astral plane, and we have found on several occasions that sometimes the spirit that we've been working with reveals itself to be a different spirit. So a lot of people have heard, like, oh, well, how do I know if I'm working with a counterfeit spirit? Well, you're not going to know until you recognize what your elemental forces are in the first place. Until you come to recognize what the elemental forces that have been with you from the beginning, you won't be able to tell. Nefrayu says, aren't the god spirits composed of elemental forces? Absolutely. Absolutely. But as I said, most of us are only going to be able to recognize and work with the elemental forces we've already been working with. When we deal with gods and higher level entities, these aren't just a conglomeration of elemental spirits. Let's put it like this. So you've got the human race as individuals. You're dealing with different people all over the place. The people you work with, your family, friends, lovers, kids, etc. But if you go up on a higher arc, you can begin to work with the collective unconscious, right? You can deal with ancestral spirits. You can deal with certain spirits that rule over industries, right? There's like they say with Catholicism, you've got an angel that watches over travel, or an angel that watches over medical people, or an angel that watches over police, right? These represent the higher arc of those individual spirits. So in other words, if you haven't risen yourself to the level to see that aspect of it, you're only going to be dealing with the individual people, right? You're only going to be working with the doctor and the nurse instead of working with who's the saint for medical people? Does anybody know? Did anybody come from Catholicism? I know you got like a saint. I don't know any of them. I don't know any of them. I've just seen people wear necklaces and have stuff hanging up on their car. No Face Divination says trickster. Yeah, and we can call them trickster spirits. Trickster spirits are gateway spirits. They are those who sit on the crossroad, and it's not merely to deceive you. They're also initiator spirits. They serve as initiators. You don't pass them until you're ready. You don't see past them until you are ready. So it's not like these trickster spirits are here to deceive you and hurt you. It's that you can't see past them until you're able to see past them. And in order to see the big picture, you have to see the small picture first. Okay, so let's talk about the Tattvic tides. I love it when you call me Big Tattva. You goofy. Act 2, peace. Rain, water, peace. Good to see you. Epic Lego Builder says, what is that background music? Space Jams. All right, chapter 15, the Tattvic tides. There are tides in the unseen, and the success of our magical workings depends very largely upon the set of those tides. They are of several kinds and produce different results. We may roughly divide them into 5: stellar, solar, planetary, lunar, and terrestrial. Does anybody here know the Tattwas by heart already? Like, can you visualize the 5 different Tattvic forms? The Collective Consciousness says, is there any good books you know about runes and their effectiveness with thoughts? I know it's off topic, but I've been using my own lately, just wondering. No, I don't have any information about runes. Runes is not something that I have studied ever, so I cannot offer any helpful information about runes. Okay, good. So there are quite a few people here who still remember the information about the Tattwas, right? You've got these 5 different shapes, and if you don't remember the names, that's fine. But you can at least visualize the shapes. That's actually way more important. So at the very top, you've got the black egg, known as Akash, right? Right there, WVT just placed them in the chat, emoji style. But yeah, the black egg represents Akash, which is the highest level of Prakriti's energy. Next, you've got the blue or gray circle. This is known as Vayu. This represents the air element. Right under that, you've got the red triangle. It's known as Agni or Tejas. That's the fire element. Then you've got the crescent moon, silver. That's Apas, that's water. And then finally, you've got the yellow square. That's Prithvi, that's the earth element. So, you got the black egg, the blue circle, the red triangle, the silver moon, crescent moon, and the yellow square. And this might be an advanced pattern that I just picked up, but perhaps he says that, because look, whenever you're dealing with 5 in the occult, you're dealing with the Tattwas. Whenever you're dealing with 5, you're dealing with the Tattwas. Even if you're dealing with the pentagram, that is the symbol of the Tattwas. When the point is upward, you've got the Akash element above the rest. When it's upside down, you've got the 4 lower elements above Akash, above spirit. But anytime you see 5, you're dealing with the Tattwas. So he lists 5 categories here. He says stellar, solar, planetary, lunar, and terrestrial. In actual work, the influences of the stellar, solar, and lunar tides work upon us through the magnetic sphere of the Earth, since it is in the sphere of the Earth that they produce their effect, right? So get this now also. The Tattwas only have their effect within manifest reality. Outside of manifest reality, the Tattwas don't exist. Why? Because the Tattwas are Prakriti. They are Prakriti. Just like you, human body, you're a head, 2 arms, 2 legs, right? That's 5. But you don't call yourself an arm or a leg or a head, you call yourself a human body. Prakriti is the 5 Tattwas. Prakriti is spirit element, air element, fire element, water element, earth element, right? That's what Prakriti is. So the Tattwas only have their effect within manifest reality. What is manifest reality? Manifest reality is the physical plane, the etheric plane, the astral plane, the mental plane, and the causal plane. That's what manifest reality is. Yes, there is reality outside of that. Unconditioned consciousness, Shiva, the God realm. But that is a place that is beyond the Tattwas. When we say unconditioned reality, guess what the conditions are? The conditions are the Tattwas. So unconditioned consciousness is consciousness beyond the elements, beyond the Tattwas, beyond Prakriti, beyond the matrix. Allah. Arm, leg, leg, arm, head. Act 2 said, Dion said, worship the supernals. Did she? Where did she say that at? I'm not so sure that sounds like the Dion Fortune I know. Are you referring to that which is beyond manifest reality? In any case, let's keep going. In actual work, the influences of the stellar, solar, and lunar tides work upon us through the magnetic sphere of the Earth, since it is in the sphere of the Earth that they produce their effect. We, being children of the Earth, as well as the race of the starry heavens, respond to the varying tides of our mother planet. In the West, very little has been given out publicly concerning the Earth tides, but in the East, where the subject has been studied without any danger of the student being persecuted, a body of knowledge concerning these things has been built up. The tides are known as Tattwas, and that unseen medium in which they flow is known as prana. Let's go back. The unseen medium through which the Tattwas flow is known as prana. This is understood to be the state of matter, which is the next stage above terrestrial matter, and we may term it etheric matter, surrounding the sun and in which move the earth and the other planets. This we may understand to be the free etheric substance, whilst prana, surrounding our planet, as well as the others of the solar system, may be called the bound ether or the magnetic sphere of our planet. A couple years ago, if you were here, do you guys remember the app, the Tattvic tides? And it showed you the different tides that the Tattwas would shift throughout the day. If you study magic, then you know that there's a concept known as planetary hours. Well, let's say that Mars rules this hour, Jupiter rules that hour. Well, that's a concept that came from this here. Remember, the Eastern philosophy came first, right? All this Hindu stuff, this Vedic stuff, the Sanskrit stuff came first. And the Western magical system that's been created thereafter was based almost entirely off of that. Peace, MC Maestro. Good to see you. Sarah X says, I love the Bible, but the unicorn is killing me, LOL. Well, we can add that to a long list of other things in this world that will kill you much faster. And you enjoy them nonetheless, don't you? Mad Titan, peace. As the Earth revolves on its axis, and also travels at the same time around the sun, centers of stress are set up in the magnetic sphere of the Earth. During the day of any part of the Earth's surface, that part sends out a positive current from east to west. So there is a steady current or tide in the magnetic sphere of the Earth flowing from east to west. As the Earth moves around the sun, a magnetic current passes from the north to the south during 6 months, and then the reverse is the case for the remaining 6 months. These seasonal tides are also of great practical value. They are marked by the solstices and equinoxes and are as follows. Star Lion, peace. So here we go. The tide of destruction, which is the one that we're currently in, December 23rd through March 21st. The tide of sowing, March 21st through June 21st. The tide of reaping, June 21st to September 23rd. The tide of planning, September 23rd to December 23rd. So, what he's describing here so far are the patterns of how prana is influenced based on the movement of the sun. And through the 12-month period of the year, the prana is flowing in a particular way, 4 different ways. We also know about the different equinoxes, the 4 corners, the 4 pillars, but also know that within a 24-hour period of a day, the Tattvic tides flow and change. Also within a week, also within an individual month. And this can also be related to what we know about astrology as far as the influence of the signs upon our bodies and minds. The corresponding aspects of these tides for the southern hemisphere can be worked out by the reader. The above are given for the northern hemisphere. Of course, they are not so sharply defined. They can merge one into the other, and the cusps where this merging takes place are of mixed influence. As the author of Ecclesiastes says, there's a time for sowing and a time for reaping, a time to be born and a time to die. And for everything under the sun, there is a time. Dang. Bible talks about it. Ain't that something? Natural selection, peace. Richard Tracy says Pluto moves into Aquarius today. Well, just like Dr. Jedi Vampire God King says, this is a pulchritudinous book for the Pluto shifting into Aquarius. Richard Tracy says last time it did that was in 2008. Pulchritudinous. The above are given for the Northern Hemisphere. Of course, they are not so sharply defined. Okay, so this does not mean that the magical student must meticulously observe times and seasons, but it does mean that when working as a magician, it is advisable to perform your operation when the right tide is flowing. The positive currents emanate from the northern center, the negative currents from the southern center, and the eastern and western channels of these currents are known as the Pingala, east, and Ida, west of the planet. So interesting, even the planet has an Ida and a Pingala force. They have their counterparts in the human body and the positive and negative currents which flow through the etheric counterpart of the spine. Generally speaking, the limit of the magnetic sphere of this planet is around the limits of the atmosphere, and within this sphere of force, every atom of Earth is a center of action and reaction for the Tattvic tides. Thus, all that has been done upon the earth is herein recorded, and by a process of induction, these terrestrial records are imprinted also on the pranic sphere of the sun. All these records are under the influence of the negative Tattvic forces, whose controller is the moon. For this reason, on the Tree of Life, Yesod, the moon sphere, is termed the treasure house of images. Let me run that back, because I don't think I got that all the way. Thus, generally speaking, the limit of the magnetic sphere of this planet is around the limits of the atmosphere. Check. And within the sphere of force, every atom of the earth is a center of action and reaction for the Tattvic tides. Thus, all that has been done upon the earth is herein recorded, and by a process of induction, these terrestrial records are imprinted also on the pranic sphere of the sun. All these records are under the influence of the negative Tattvic forces, whose controller is the moon. For this reason, on the Tree of Life, Yesod, the moon sphere, is termed the treasure house of images. Interesting, interesting. So that makes me think about, you guys ever see those old school toy music boxes? And like you wind it up and it clicks, and as the metal rod turns, it's got these little bitty metal tabs, and there's a bunch of pricks all over the metal rod. And as the rod goes around and rotates, it plucks one of those metal tabs and it begins to make music. And we can think about how those dots are on the metal bar that's rotating. We could see that as the sun. And then the individual tabs that, hold the notes of the music, we could see that as the lunar influence. I think in a way what is kind of being communicated here is that there is a certain sense of fate, of destiny, of reality already being scripted, planned, but not so much as like specific events that are going to happen, but more of potentials. And we're literally just within this gigantic music box as it turns and the notes are plucked. And it can be predict as far as what notes are coming next, right? That's how you guys are able to tell that Pluto is entering Aquarius. have to keep scrolling back up to the chat so I can find that damn word. What is that word? Pulchritudinous. Interesting. MC Maestro says, Trav, are you saying that when there's a major event on a side of the world that we focus on is actually an oscillation between Ida and Pingala and not the emotional narrative that we attach to? Oh, that's a good point. When there's a major event on a side of the world that we focus on is actually an oscillation between Ida and Pingala and not the emotional narrative that we attach to. I am of a mind that these things not only are bound to happen, but also have to happen. And it really has nothing to do with me or any of us. It's the Earth going through her own collective shadow work. Treasure House of Images. The lunar tides work in a rhythm of that lunar month and are roughly divided into two, the tides of the waxing moon and the tides of the waning moon. It is customary not to essay practical occult works, unless it is imperative that they should be done, during the waning phase of the moon. The last quarter or dark of the moon is usually reserved in the occult circles for simple lectures and so on. The planetary tides, as we have seen, affect us through the magnetic sphere of the Earth, but their influence is subject to great alteration by the terrestrial magnetic currents. Now, the Tattvic tide, which swirls around our planet from east to west, is fivefold, and each of its components has its maximum and minimum periods. The element of Akasha is strongest at sunrise. Then it merges into the element of Vayu. This in its turn, merges into Tattwas, and this into Appas. And finally, Appas merges into Prithvi. Then the cycle is repeated. Each Tattvic tide is composite. For example, in the first flow of the tide at sunrise, Akasha is the dominant, but together with Akasha are the four other aspects of the tide, and these build up in power until, as the dominant phase of Akasha begins to weaken, the phase of Vayu becomes dominant, to be followed by the others in succession. So all the five Tattvic tide currents are always flowing, but their individual power varies in rhythmic fashion. Now, each Tattvic aspect produces certain conditions in the magnetic sphere of the Earth, and so will help or hinder the magician in his particular work. A knowledge of what tide is flowing is therefore very helpful. Okay, so what does he mean by that? What does he mean by that? So, you're going to have to think of, first off, the five Tattwas as a pattern, right? So it's a pattern from Akash to the air element, to the fire element, to the water element, to the earth element. That's the pattern, and then it repeats, right? So that's always going to take place. Go ahead and lock that in. We go from Akash to air, to fire, to water, to earth. It's going to be that pattern, and once it gets to earth, it's going to repeat. The same way we go from Kether to Malkuth, and when you go to the next tree, you repeat back up to Kether. So we got that part down, right? What he's also saying here is that each individual Tattva has these five phases within them. So at sunrise, you're dealing with the Akash element that is dominant. Now, before it switches to the air element, what happens first is it goes through the five phases. So first it's Akash of Akash, then it's Akash of Vayu, then it's Akash of Tattwas, then it's Akash of Appas, then it's Akash of Prithvi, then it moves to the next element. Then it becomes air of Vayu, then air of air, ether of Vayu, then air of air, then fire of air, then water of air, then earth of air, then it moves to fire. Then it's ether of fire, air of fire, water of fire, earth of fire, and then it continues down. Does that make sense? So there's a pattern of 5 that repeats, and depending on what element is being dominant at the time, it is also broken up into these same 5 categories. So that would bring you to 25 Tattvas, 25 individual Tattvic influences. MC Maestro says, using the laws of correspondence and reversal, this process happens backwards on the etheric. I hope that's clear. That might be a lot of information, but that's how it works when you're dealing with these tattvas. We're dealing with 25 potential patterns of a pattern of 25 potential influences of energy, from Akash of Akash all the way down to Prithvi of Prithvi, and then it starts over. Now this is a pattern system, right? And it isn't just used to figure out what type of energy is ruling what hour of the day. This is also how you can get very meticulous when it comes to dealing with the energy of the self, because these 5 elements also rule the body, just like you said earlier. And they have correspondences with the Akash dealing with the top of the head, Vayu dealing with the throat, Tehas dealing with the heart, Apas dealing with the sexual region, and Prithvi dealing with the feet. And within those 5 categories exist these 5 within. So there's 25 slices energetically of the human body. There's a practice that's called Tattwas Shuddhi that teaches you specifically how to harmonize these elements within the body. And just like what Lasange Decode says, the elemental chain of command. You're also dealing with the hierarchy here. And this isn't something that's just like standalone, random, doesn't make sense. Those 25 that I mentioned also align with the tarot, right? So you'll find that you can locate all 25 of those elements within the tarot cards. Now you might have to do a little bit of math here, but specifically, you'll find those elements minus the Akash aspect, because the Akash is represented by the aces. But if you take those out, you've got the 4 elements times 4. And what that's going to give you is the kings, the queens, the knights, and the pages. So these elemental forces are, like I said, a fundamental part of what we know of as magic. And you're already working with them, but if you wanted to understand what they correspond with, a good place to look that you may be familiar with already would be the court cards in your tarot deck. So the kings, the queens, the knights, and the pages all represent specifically these Tattvic forces. More on that later, I guess. So here he's got the colors if you wanted to create them yourself or have a representation. I myself have a deck that I made that has these for meditation purposes. Akash ether is going to be indigo or black. Vayu air, that's going to be blue. Tehas fire, that's going to be red. Apas water, that's silver. Prithvi earth is yellow. I've shown those cards plenty of times, so I'm sure you guys know exactly what I'm talking about. There are certain symbols used to denote the Tattwas, and these are what I just said. These Tattvic symbols are of very great use when the student is working with the visualizing exercises detailed in the preceding section. They may be combined, i.e. the red triangle of Tattwas may be placed in the center of the yellow square of Prithvi, and they are undoubtedly splendid objects for the exercises. They can also be used as gates into the astral light, as key symbols which will open up to the student the corresponding level of the astral. So, another important use of these particular symbols is entering into certain parts of the astral plane during meditation. There is a process called Tattwa vision, where you use these symbols as focal points, as meditation focal points, to bring yourself into familiarity with a specific aspect of the astral plane. Doggies for Dinner says, I knew a guy who claimed to be able to astral project. He killed himself one day. Do you think he encountered something on the astral realm, or do you think these were his own demons he was battling? Well, I mean, for someone to make a decision like that, they've got a lot going on, so it would be impossible to conclude why he did it, especially me, because I don't even know this person. Just because he was dealing with astral stuff doesn't mean that's what caused it. You know, usually when somebody makes a decision like that, there's a lot going on. There's a lot going on. And I think we all want closure, and we all want to find an answer that makes sense to us. And it would be easy to blame something like that, maybe because you might not know much about it or whatever. But I think it wouldn't be the best to kind of try to assume why somebody did something like that. I can say for sure that doing work in the astral certainly brings things out into the open that will have to be dealt with. And if there's a lot of unhealed trauma, if there's a lot of emotional disturbance that hasn't been neutralized, there's a extremely high likelihood that you're going to face those things while doing this type of work. But again, it wouldn't be wise to just assume that we know why somebody did something like that. All right, so let's continue. Speaking of Tattwa vision and Tattwa tides and Tattwa work, the body of light is the next chapter. I did a class about this a few years ago. This has always been one of my favorite concepts to deal with here. The light. So let's see what our good teacher has to say about this particular aspect. Hey, if you're just joining and you haven't hit the like button yet, I humbly ask you to be pulchritudinous and hit the like button. And here we go. I'm pulchritudinous in these streets. big pulchritudinis out here. MC Maestro says melanin body. That'll be my next class, building your melanin body. Body of melanin. All right, chapter 16, the body of light. The body of light is a technical term used in the Western esoteric schools to refer to what may be described as an artificial body or vehicle of consciousness, which is used by the magician to project his consciousness from his physical body. In some Eastern schools, this body is known as the Manomaya Kosha. Manomaya Kosha. So remember earlier I said that the etheric body is technically known as the Pranamaya Kosha. Well, the Manomaya Kosha, we can see a correspondence to what we know of as the astral body. So you got the Annamaya Kosha, which is the physical body, the Pranamaya Kosha, which is the etheric body, the Manomaya Kosha, which is this body of light. Then we've got the Vijnanamaya Kosha and the Anandamaya Kosha. Lashanish Dakota says emotional body. Yes, exactly. So the Manomaya Kosha translates to the emotional body. And remember what he said about magnetism before. And on the subjective plane, this magnetism is translated as emotion. So it would make sense that he's tying it all together here. Magnetism, elements, body of light. Cool beans. In some Eastern schools, this body is known as the Manomaya Kosha, which may be roughly translated as the thought-created sheath, or the body of illusion. In other words, it is a mentally produced vehicle of consciousness which appears to be a replica of the body of the magician, though it need not take that form. The particular psychic operation which has been popularized of late years in Western circles, the so-called projection of the astral body, is an example of the use of the body of light. At the same time, it should be realized that in some cases, far more than a simple thought form is projected. This brings us to the crux of the matter. Anyone with a good visualizing power can build up a thought form, and with training may succeed in transferring his personal consciousness thereto. But for the further stages of this operation, it is essential that there should be what may be described as a splitting up of the subtle inner bodies. Most people nowadays are familiar with the idea of a split personality, but this is not what we mean in this connection. In order to make our meaning perfectly clear, it is necessary to touch briefly upon the vehicles or bodies possessed by man. So let's get into those vehicles. We are all aware that we possess a physical body, since it is perfectly evident to our waking consciousness. We fail, however, to realize the existence of the inner bodies because cognition of them does not extend into normal waking consciousness. Nevertheless, the various inner bodies do exist. For our present purposes, we will briefly deal with the three inner bodies which are normally employed in the practice of astral projection. These are the so-called etheric double, the astral body, and the mental body. The etheric body is really the true physical body, since it is the matrix or mold into which flows the physical substance gained from food and drink. Now think about that. When you think about health and wellness from an energetic perspective, the physical body comes second to the etheric body. The etheric body is the prototype. Now with this prototype, it's like you've got the shape of the self. And you've got the shape of the brain and the shape of the eyes and the shape of the lungs, etc. So as your physical body goes through time, your cells regenerate, parts die, you eat food, your cells just know to send new parts here, to get rid of certain parts from there, and generally you stay conformed to a certain type of shape. Well, this isn't happening because the brain knows what to do. This is the work of the etheric body. And the things that you eat is processed and it goes to the right place according to where the etheric body is lined up. When the etheric body begins to lack its ability to keep up that perfect prototype, that's when you start to manifest dis-ease. That's when you start to manifest dysfunction in the physical body. So it starts on the etheric level. That's where energetic healing comes into play. Energetic healing is not done on the physical body. It's done on the etheric body. And the etheric body forces the physical body to conform. So looking at health from an energetic standpoint, that's the perspective that's being taken here. Felipe C says, is there another print of this book? Yes, there is. There's quite a few prints. I believe one of them is like 2 of these books combined. So here we go. Nevertheless, the various inner bodies do exist. For our present purposes, we will deal briefly with the 3 inner bodies, which are normally employed in the practice of astral projection. These are the so-called etheric double, the astral body, and the mental body. The etheric body is really the true physical body, since it is the matrix or mold into which flows the physical substance gained from food and drink. So Maya kosha, we just talked about, means the thought-created body. Pranamaya kosha is the body created from prana, that's the etheric body. And the Annamaya kosha is the body of food, it's the body created by food. So that's why it says here, it's the matrix or mold into which flows the physical substance gained from food and drink. But as we know, this material substance is in a constant state of flux or movement. And in the course of a few years, all atoms of matter which make up the physical body have been replaced by new atoms. So there is a constant intake of matter, its assimilation by the living cells of the body, and its later rejection and discharge from the body. Cooley High, peace. The individual cell lives are energized by the permanent, for this life, etheric body, and will therefore build the new atoms into the old pattern. So our body retains its distinctive appearance, though as the years go by, the power of the cell life to build truly on the etheric pattern begins to lessen, and false patterns are built in. An example of this sometimes occurs in the nervous system, where instead of the true nerve substance being built up, the cell life builds into the nerve that particular type of substance known as connective tissue. This is a very useful substance in its proper place, but when it is built up into the nerve, it is as though we replaced part of a wire which carries electricity by a length of rubber. The rubber, being a non-conductor of electricity, will prevent any current flowing, and in like manner, the connective tissue which may be built up into parts of a nerve does not transmit the nerve current and renders the nerve useless. Some forms of deafness in aged people are due to this faulty rebuilding of the aural nerves. So like I said, the etheric body is a pattern. The physical body fills in the gaps of that pattern. But as we age, sometimes that prototype begins to not live up to its fidelity. So that's why the human body begins to fall apart. Now, the etheric matrix, or double, normally remains in close union with the physical body and is only separated therefrom, and then only partially by certain drugs, general anesthetics, mesmerism, and hypnotism. When the etheric is driven out of the physical body by any one of these means, a certain amount of it remains with the physical, and between the exteriorized etheric double and the part still remaining on the physical levels, there is what has been termed the silver cord. Should this cord be broken, then death has occurred. Certainly you've heard people talk about astral projection and lucid dreaming, and there's multiple reports of people seeing a type of silver cord that is connected to their sleeping body while they dream, while they're lucid. It is important to realize that although the etheric double is the permanent mold of the physical, it is in itself fluidic, i.e., it can be split up into several more etheric duplicates of itself. The double is also both the channel for the vital energies which keep the physical body going, and the link between the physical brain and the corresponding centers of consciousness of the inner bodies. To remember or bring through the recollection of an astral plane activity, it is necessary to so work upon the etheric body that a certain amount of its substance vibrates in harmony with our astral consciousness. When this has been done, then it is possible to induce in the physical brain some memory of what has been seen and done on the inner planes. Though since inner plane experiences are not of the material order, it will be found almost impossible to bring through a full realization of such experiences. The essence will usually escape us. And that's an explanation of why it can be so difficult to remember your dreams when you wake up, why it can be so difficult to bring back dream time experiences into the physical plane, because that information is coded differently. In other words, our conscious mind is very much used to recording reality through the 5 channels of the 5 senses. So we're used to recording reality through stuff that we've seen, smelt, tasted, heard, felt. You can see those as a type of language that is written on your memory. Now, when you go into the dream state, you're not using those 5 senses. So what you experience is not going to be recorded. It's not going to be recorded by that same language. When your consciousness returns to the physical body, you'll find it more and more difficult to remember what you just dreamt because it was not written in the language that you're used to reading. So what does that mean? That means if you want to remember your dreams, you've got to spend some time in the aspect of self that does dream. And that's what we're talking about here, this body of light, this etheric body, this astral body. I agree with you, Lasange Decote. Lasange Decote says you can detach from the physical body also by vigorously not identifying with it. Yes, that's the slow and steady way of going. Peace, Ace. So it says here, it is important to realize that although the etheric double is the permanent mold of the physical, it is in itself fluidic, In other words, it can be split up into several more etheric duplicates of itself. The double is also both the channel for the vital energies which keep the physical body going, and the link between the physical brain and the corresponding centers of consciousness of the inner bodies. To remember, or to bring through the recollection of an astral plane activity, it is necessary to so work upon the etheric body that a certain amount of its substance vibrates in harmony with our astral consciousness. When this has been done, then it is possible to induce in the physical brain some memory of what has been seen and done on the inner planes. Though since inner plane experiences are not of the material order, it will be found almost impossible to bring through a full realization of such experiences. The essence will usually escape us. In the Western schools, a system of symbol building is used to enable the magician to deal with the superphysical senses. The alteration of the vibration rate of part of the etheric double is sometimes known as the splitting of the moon, since the etheric double is, like our moon, a reflector of light received from another source. The exercise described in the section dealing with the interwoven light has the effect, among many others, of splitting the etheric, or more precisely adapting part of it to the vibration ratio of the astral body of the student. The astral or psychic body is usually well developed in most people, and the astral senses, or rather sense, active. But because of a lack of contact between the physical brain and the astral center of consciousness, the perceptions of the psychic senses are not transmitted to the physical plane consciousness. What is known as psychic development makes such links of contact, and equally the magician's training is intended to build up such links between the consciousness on the outer and inner planes. So what he said there is that the physical body and our senses are obviously well developed, and for most people the astral body and its senses are well developed. The difference is, or the issue is that there's a disconnect between those two states. The thing within you known as consciousness fluctuates between these bodies. So right now, your consciousness is in your physical body. And when you lay down and go to sleep, your consciousness floats up into the astral body. And when you wake back up again, it comes back to the physical body. So when he's talking about developing psychic abilities, hell, or even being able to remember your dreams, what has to take place is a process of connecting the physical mind to the astral mind. What Ophiel taught in his books, and we've read damn near all of them, is that these different bodies are vehicles of consciousness. So in other words, right now you're in the vehicle of the physical body. And when you dream, you're in the vehicle of the astral body. So what we need is some type of connection, some way to convey data from one to the other. Now, we're talking about three different bodies here. There's a body that's in between the physical and the astral. That's the etheric body. This is the body of prana. So a major part of the work to be done is strengthening and establishing this etheric body so that you'll find that the connection between the physical and the astral can be smooth. What is known as psychic development makes such links of contact, and equally the magician's training is intended to build up such links between consciousness on the outer and inner planes. When, after the preliminary work with the interwoven light, the magician comes to the work of formulating and using the body of light, he will find that although the technique is simple enough, there are several critical points where failure may ensue. But persistent practice will in the end produce the desired result. Indeed, it may be stated that persistence is one of the most important traits to be developed by the magician. Again and again will the endeavor to formulate the body of light be unsuccessful, but again and again must he try until suddenly he one day finds that he is no longer in the inert physical body which he sees resting on the bed or the couch before him. Like Tennyson's ancient sage, the mortal limit of the self has been loosed, and the student stands fully conscious in the body of light. This is a tremendous experience, and the present writer well remembers the time, now some 40 years ago, when under the guidance of his teacher, he first stood forth in the body of light and gazed on his earthly form, lying in deep trance on the couch. Whoever has this experience knows in a mode of absolute knowledge that he is not the physical body with which he has for so long identified himself. Facts. When you do have this experience, that is the number one defining piece of evidence you need that you are not the physical body, right? That's something that we say. A lot of people say it, but those same people don't believe it. How can they believe it? Because they've never experienced it. Once you do have this experience, nobody can do you any different because you've seen it. He says, whoever has this experience knows in a mode of absolute knowledge that he is not the physical body with which he has for so long identified himself. It is possibly one of the greatest experiences which can happen to man, and perhaps the novelist Lord Bulwer Lytton was thinking of this in his book Zanoni, when he makes the Rosicrucian adept Mejnour remark, man's first initiation is in trance. The transference of the consciousness from the physical body to the body of light results in the sleep of the physical. And this sleep may vary from so light a condition of unconsciousness that such a thing as a check in the circulation of blood due to a tight article of clothing or a change in temperature may bring back the projected consciousness into the physical body to a state of cataleptic rigor, in which the whole body is stiff and rigid. Goodness gracious. Just a second, hold on. All right. Normally, however, the trance of projection is not so deep as the cataleptic condition. It is interesting to note that in the deeper stages of trance, there are well-defined changes in the chemical composition of the bloodstream. Many beginners are afraid that if they are successful in projecting the body of light, they may be locked out, as it were, and unable to get back. There's a story by H.G. Wells called The Stolen Body, which deals with such a dilemma. They need to have no fear on this score. The difficulty, especially in that early stage, is to keep out of the physical. In other words, there's not a problem with you coming back to your body. The problem is staying out of it. The difficulty is staying out of the body. We said that the etheric double, whenever it partially or wholly leaves the physical body, is connected with it by a connecting etheric link or cord. This etheric cable tow is extremely sensitive to changes occurring in the physical body and constantly tends to draw the extruded etheric substance back into the body. Such withdrawal is sometimes practically instantaneous. The writer has seen the body of a medium marked with very definite bruises when the extruded double, together with a certain amount of ectoplasmic substance, had returned suddenly and violently to the physical body from which it came. This sudden return being because a sitter had suddenly grasped the materialized form. He says this phenomena of the infliction of injury upon the medium by injury inflicted on the extruded etheric form is known as repercussion and figures in much of the evidence in the trials of witches in medieval times. She's a witch. We have dwelt upon this point in order to reassure those who feel that to project out of the body is akin to jumping into deep water when you are unable to swim. You may get out, or you may not. In projection, however, such a danger is so remote that for all practical purpose, it does not exist. A far more definite danger is that the practice may throw a strain upon the heart, but no one should attempt practical magical work if they suffer from any organic disease of the heart. If such a sufferer wishes to become consciously aware of the astral world, let him develop the links between the astral and physical levels of his consciousness by the use of the symbol chain when falling asleep, and again when waking. He may in this way attain, without risk to his health, practical knowledge and experience of the inner worlds. How is the formulation and projection of the body of light accomplished? The first step is quite easy. The more so if the visualizing exercises already described have been systematically used. The student should be seated in such a position that he is free from any undue worry about his physical body. The less he receives in sensations telegraphed to his brain consciousness by the nerves of sensation, the better. Some European students attempt to sit in one or other of the various asanas or postures which are commonly used in the Orient. But although when they are mastered they can be most comfortable, they are usually anything but comfortable to the European type of body. Now, since the student is endeavoring to take the consciousness out of the body, it seems rather foolish to adapt a position which will continually be calling the consciousness back into the body. It is true that certain yoga postures do short circuit and link together some of the magnetic currents of the body, but for the purpose of projection, intricate etheric postures are not necessary. So let the posture be one of comfort. Quite a good one is sitting in an easy chair so arranged that the body leans slightly back from the perpendicular and the back is kept straight. Or the student can lie flat on his back on a couch or a bed, but whatever position he is in, he must, when he commences this exercise, visualize his body of light as being in identically the same position. Before attempting the actual projection, the banishing ritual of the lesser pentagram should be used. Then, seated in this particular posture, the student should carefully visualize, subjectively, the shape of that form he desires to project. Next, he should externalize his mental image and see it apparently objectively. The figure may be clothed as the experimenter or as his fancy dictates. A good image, so the present writer found out many years ago, is of a robed and hooded figure, the details of the robe and figure being clearly pictured and projected. So there we go, back to my poll. Whether you voted hood or pointy hat, this is the time for you to put it into practice. Peace, Louie. Good to see you. Next, he should externalize this mental image and see it apparently objectively. The figure may be clothed as the experimenter or as his fancy dictates. A good image, so the present writer found out many years ago, is of a robed and hooded figure, the details of the robe and figure being clearly pictured and projected. When this has been done, the second stage in projection may be attempted. Here, the experimenter is splitting the etheric and transferring the tenuous etheric, astral, and mental substance to the thought form which he has projected. Such transference can be achieved by the use of the exercise of the interwoven light and the breathing exercises based upon it. When the thought image has been charged with energy in this way, the third stage may be started. The experimenter is now trying to transfer his waking consciousness into the form. For this stage, the first step consists in making the body of light do certain things, move about, speak, etc., as though it was a puppet, actuated by remote radio control. When the visualized form can be clearly kept in the mental vision and made to move easily, the final act of identification can be made. First of all, the mental intention to project consciousness into the form is made by a strong, momentary effort of will. Do not keep on willing. The definite intention or act of will sets the appropriate etheric and astral forces in action. The next step is to step forward in thought and enter the form which stands before you, and immediately make an imaginative effort to see and hear and feel from the standpoint of the figure. This is the crucial point in the operation, and as we have said, the student may try many times before success is achieved. Usually when one is at last successful, there is heard a curious sound, somewhat like a sharp metallic click. The student is now standing out of his physical body and clothed in the body of light. At first, he will clearly see the physical plane surroundings, all apparently self-luminous with a clear bluish light. Who remembers that bluish light from Dharana Darshan, the Chitakasha? His sleeping physical body lies before him, and a thin silvery cord of misty light connects him with it. Framestar Films, peace, good evening. If, however, he wishes to go any distance from his physical body, he must, again, by a momentary effort of will, send back some of the denser etheric substance in which he is now working. When this has been done, the body of light is less susceptible to physical plane disturbances of various kinds, and it can be projected to much greater distances. Always, the student will, in the earlier stages at least, feel the pull of the silver cord as it responds to the varying physical plane impressions coming in via the physical body. But with increasing dexterity, the tendency to move back into the physical will lessen. During projection, it is comparatively easy, if any automatic writing ability has been developed, to concentrate mentally upon the physical brain, causing the hand to write automatically and so record the observations one is making. Or concentration may be made upon the throat, and the physical voice will record the telepathic impressions being sent in from its owner. But these are later developments, as such concentration on the physical body tends to draw one back into it. MC Maestro says, I had a lot of physical pain in my forehead when projecting, but that stopped when I was doing chakra shuddhi consistently. It is when the student first stands forth in the body of light that his troubles begin. For he is as a child, newly born on the etheric plane. The surging magnetic tides of the etheric earth will tend to drift him aimlessly along, and his ill-controlled imagination will switch him instantaneously from one set of conditions to another. Here too he will find that what were but symbols on the physical plane are living things, and here will he find that many of the fixed laws of nature concerning which he has so proudly spoken are reversed and worked in a very different way. It is necessary to have some clue to the astral maze, and this clue is to be found in the use of the symbols associated with the pivotal diagram of the Western magical schools, the Tree of Life. By using these symbols as doors through which one makes contact with the astral powers. It is possible for the student to bring order and method into his astral wanderings, and thus avoid becoming one of those whom one occult teacher I knew referred to as astral tramps. Astral tramps. I think I've seen quite a few of those. The student should always remember that, in the words of Marcus Aurelius, we are never less alone than when we think we are alone. We are never less alone than when we think we are alone. There are guides and teachers who may not at first be perceived, but who will make themselves known to him. Always he should test such teachers by the moral and mental standards which he has built by his series of meditations when he was engaged in building his magical personality. These standards he will have embodied in certain symbolic figures and gestures, and these he will use to test those who appear in the astral and claim to guide and teach him. Having left the physical and worked in the body of light, the student must now return. For some time there will have been an increasing pull from the physical, and he has only to yield voluntarily to this pull for him to be instantaneously yanked back into his material body. Such a rapid return tends to break the consciousness link, and also the memory chain, which enables him to recollect his astral experiences. The return should therefore be deliberate. This is not easy at first, as the pull of the physical is increased as one comes near to it. Peace, Alora. If the student has gone out by the way of the pylon door of some train of associated symbols, then by that door he should return until, in his body of light, he stands once more gazing down upon his sleeping physical organism. The intention to return slowly into the physical should be made, and the same projection of consciousness as that used in the stepping out should be made, but of course, in reverse. So yeah, he just described the process of utilizing the body of light in a very simple method, right? Of course, we deal with relaxation, getting comfortable. You project this image of the self, and then through concentration, through focus, through will, you send your consciousness into that image. And this can be done while in meditation or even while laying down to sleep. The difficulty isn't getting lost and not ever coming back. The difficulty is actually staying there and maintaining a presence in this etheric astral realm. But one of the important parts of this, he's saying, is that it can be difficult to retain memory and bring back information. So it is helpful to develop your own library of correspondences and symbols so that you can quickly kind of notate when you come back. Nefrayu says, how does this correspond to the 30-second path? Well, in order for you to do path working on the 30-second path, you've got to start with this process. I mean, to do deliberate work on the 30-second path, you would go into your astral body, your etheric body, whatever you can muster, and you'd focus on the symbolism associated with the 30-second path. So that could be the universe card, the world card. That could be some other type of scenario outlined in a book about path working. But by you, just like what he was saying right there in that very last part, going through the pylon door of some train of associated symbols, that's what he's talking about. If you're focused on the 30-second path, you'd utilize those associated symbols with that path. That's what you'd be focusing on, so that when you enter the body of light, that's the realm that you're traveling within. That's the realm that you're traveling within. And one of the pieces of evidence that you were successful in that process is that you'll begin to see it play out. You'll begin to see it replicated and echoed in your physical life. Because you will have essentially opened up those energies associated with the 30-second path, and they will filter through into your physical world. Sanj Decode says the essence is what you want. Even patterns of thought and ideas have an essence that you understand when you are in the spirit of it, which then may not be as deeply grasped when you're out of it. The essence is lost. Alternatively, you could focus on one of those Tattvic elements that was mentioned earlier. That really, you could focus on anything. There's any number of things that you could focus on depending on what your work is. You got a whole selection of tarot cards that can serve as doors and gateways. You've got those elements. You've got sigils of your own creation, right? I've done this with sigils that I've made. There's so many different paths to take. When the star of consciousness with its associated astral memories has been transferred into the physical, the student should visualize the body of light in which he has been working as standing before him. He should then, by a steady effort of will, draw it back into himself. This should never be omitted. The form will subsist in this astral mental sphere and be more easily formulated and sent forth in the future. But to leave such a form or forms drifting idly around in one's psychic atmosphere is definitely unwise. So if we're going to call this body of light a vehicle, then it would be smart to make sure that you park the vehicle back in the garage. He should then, by a steady effort of will, draw it back into himself. This should never be omitted. One curious point emerges here, a point with which the student will make practical acquaintance as time goes on. The body of light may show alarming signs of being itself an independent being and will not respond to its formulator. When this occurs, the practice of projection should be preceded by a meditation on the principles used to build up the magical personality and the errant body of light disciplined and controlled. Of course, as we have said, all magic work, including the projection of the body of light, should be preceded by the assumption of the magical personality. Never allow it to break away or become dominant. It is your Vahan, your vehicle, and you should be its master, and it must be your servant. All right. How are we feeling? How are you all still in the chat? Give me some feedback. Where are we at? Who's still with us in this book study? Peace to you, Alora. Very pulchritudinous to have you here today. All right, so let's see. Richard Tracy says, excellent. I have missed these live book reads. Oh, and they have missed you for sure. Anna Molly says, questions are being answered. Great. Framestar Film says, thank you for flashing the tarot card just now, Trav, as it made me recall a dream I had last night. Awesome, awesome. I can certainly say, though, what he's talking about here, I mean, it may sound like really simple and basic, but if you put this stuff into practice, you'll see that it very much does work. And not just work, but it becomes an integral tool. It becomes an integral part of your magic practice, right? The more that you start working with using your dreams as another source of learning and information, you'll begin to wonder how you even made it along without doing so. And it's taken me quite a while to really be able to get to the point where I can say that I can consistently work with my dreams. Maybe it's just me, but I'll say it does come with its own new set of difficulties that you have to handle. But being able to work with this body of light can certainly enable you to remember your dreams better. But not just for the sake of remembering your dreams, but to be able to remember them for analysis, right? To be able to remember your dreams so that you can pull out the symbols. Hopefully you go into your dreams with some type of intention. Sometimes I forget because I'm tired and I just fall asleep, but most of the time when I go to sleep, I have an intention. There's something I want to learn. There's some type of answer I want. There's something that I'm looking to get out of the dream. And for me, this has become a new tool on my shelf to work with. Really cool. But like I said, it does come with its own set of difficulties. Things can start to blend, you know, not so much as like, oh, am I still dreaming or am I awake? Like not that so much, but it's like, stuff can start feeling very liquid. Very liquid. So yeah, hopefully you can get to this point where you are able to work with this body of light, work with your dreams intentionally, and learn more about yourself. Let's see. Part 3 has got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.5 pages left. I wonder if we're gonna do those 5.5 pages or save it for next week. Laura says, I had an interesting talk about this aspect yesterday with a guy who was in a coma before. What did he say about that? Hazard Pie says, after listening to these book readings, my dreams are different. Like my dream is a whole conversation about what I listen to. That's pretty dope. I like that because, you know, I understand a little bit about the subconscious mind, and that just goes to show that it's going into storage, and then you're going back into storage and shuffling through the data. All right, so y'all done? Or y'all want to do these last 5 pages? What time is it? 10:40? I guess we got time. We've gone later than this. Olora says, he said that he was convinced that his dream was real. And when he came to, it took a solid week and a half for him to realize where he was and what time period. Wow. And now he claims that he gets flashes of memories that are so vivid, he's convinced they happened, and he has to remind himself that it's not real anymore. Fluid. Framestar Film says, for the last 3 days, I've presented a seminar in script writing from an esoteric point of view to some extent. In hindsight, the 3-day process has worked like a ritual on the astral, as the results have manifested in my dreams last night. Needed to hurry and write that down. Nice, nice. All right, so let's go with this final part. He mentioned the magical personality quite a few times, right? In specific, he said that before assuming this body of light, you want to assume the magical personality. So I wonder what he means by that. What do you think he means by the magical personality? Cha Edwin says, this book is solid. Thank you for sharing, Broham. My pleasure. So what do you think he means by the magical personality? What's that all about? Veronica Archaga says trance. Lasange Decode says identifying with the conditioned potential of Prakriti for the work at hand in preparation for it. Visual OD says, is it similar to assuming a god form? Ace says the way you make decisions in the astral. Jaleel Cannon says, when you're not a people person, but for some reason everyone is attracted to you. Well, let's find out what he means by the magical personality. Because I think it has to do with, are you a hood magician or a pointy hat wizard? Cast your vote. Chapter 17, The Magical Personality. There are several ways in which what we may term the magical pressure in the personality may be increased. And of these, the magical personality is one of the most important, as the psychologists have proved through the study of those curious states of mind known as alternating or split personalities. Our ordinary personality is a rather unstable thing, constructed haphazardly, and easily affected by outside conditions. It is possible for us to remold that personality. Indeed, at some time or other in our magical career, we shall have to do this. But long before the permanent alteration is effected, we can have commenced to build up an alternative personality which shall serve as an efficient instrument for our magical work. There are definite rules for the construction of such a magical personality, and if they are carefully observed, the result will be of the greatest help to the magician. Wow. I just realized how much I have to continue doing this. I shouldn't take a break for so long. I think it was 2 months. 2 months since the last chapter I read. Oy vey. It must, however, be kept in mind that the personality splitting or schizophrenic tendency has to be reckoned with in this work. We see a similar state of affairs in connection with certain actors and actresses who have to play some particular character in a play which enjoys a very long run. The stage character they have been portraying for so long seems to gain a certain kind of individual existence in their mind and does at times appear to intrude into and supersede the normal waking consciousness. But this, of course, is what we do not want to happen in our magical work. In that work, we must always be positive and dominant masters of the temple of our personality. This is one of the cardinal points in magical work. Although the personality must be held open to any inflow of power, light, or wisdom from the deeper self within, it must be so built and trained that no involuntary actions can take place in it. When we begin to build up the magical personality, therefore, we must so work that all involuntary manifestations of it are stopped at source. The magical personality must never be allowed to manifest suddenly unless the will and waking consciousness of the normal personality concur. So rule 1 is always build the magical personality positively and never allow it to manifest without your definite personal agreement. That reminds me of, I've heard stories of actors even recently. I think it was, Johnny Depp with his Pirates of the Caribbean and a few other actors where they take so long getting into character and sometimes it takes them a while to get out of character. In order to build up a balanced magical personality constructed around the 3 basic aspects of life: power, love, and wisdom. Take each one of these in turn and use it as the central idea in your meditation. Here is a typical meditation of the power aspect. I am meditating on power with a capital P. Why a capital? Why, all manifestations of energy are individual expressions of the one energy which lies behind them all. The flaming crater of the volcano, the mountainous waves of the tempest-torn ocean, the devastating fury of the hurricane, the roaring terror of the avalanche are all expressions of the primal energy. So too are the manifestations of power in the realms of life. The strength of the mastodon and the great saurians, the fury of the lion and the conquering wills of those men and women who in their day and generation have altered the destinies of nations. All these were but partial manifestations of that strength which guides Arcturus and his sons, which upholds all creation by the might of its power. And I, son of the earth, feeble and ignorant, am also of the race of the starry heavens, a spark of that mighty flame, and within me also is that power. I aspire towards that radiant source of all power. O thou, the eternal, whose spark dwells within me, I strive to realize thee within myself. May thy power descend upon me and work through me that thy will may be done, and thy plan brought to its consummation within me. To the greater I submit. This, of course, is but a rough draft of such a meditation, but the idea will be seen. In the same way, similar meditations should be made on the other two aspects, love and wisdom. In all these meditations, the aim should be a realization of the unity of all the manifestations of the particular aspect which is being considered, followed by an aspiration towards union with that transcendent unity. It is most important that the building up of the form aspect of the magical personality should not be commenced before These three aspects of life have been thoroughly meditated upon, and some realization of their nature gained. Right? So the whole purpose of this is not simply to have a prayer towards power or a prayer towards love and wisdom. These types of incantations and invocations are not just pretty words. I mentioned in the cyclomancy class that we recently had that when it comes to worship, right, when it actually comes to what we call worship, the idea isn't to share pretty words to some spirit, right? It isn't just to try to sweet talk and say something nice to God, because God doesn't care. Spirits don't care about that kind of thing. Worship is not for the entities. Hear me out. Worship is not for the entity that you are worshiping. It's for you. It's for the self. It's for the personality. It's for the ego. When you undergo the process of devotion and worship and praise and all that good stuff, it does absolutely nothing for the spirit that you're working with. What it does do, however, is it puts you into alignment with the seriousness of that entity. So this whole thing about praise, worship, and invocation, it's not for some external being. It does literally nothing for the entity. But what it does do is it aligns you with respect towards the force that you're working with. There are some energies that in order to work with them, you have to get on its wavelength. You have to get on its frequency. And the only way to do that is to stop for a moment and disconnect yourself from your daily life and recognize what it is that you're working with. So a prayer like this, what it's helping to do is to help you come into alignment with the essence of power. And that's what you want to do. You want to come into alignment with the essence of power, with the essence of love, and with the essence of wisdom. Once you do that, then you start the creation of this image, this thought form. This can be considered somewhat of an advanced task, not because it's hard in itself, but because it's difficult for most of us to transcend our own ego. It's difficult to transcend the ego, to move out of our own way. I first saw this in Initiation to Hermetics. It's on the last step where you create your own personal connection with God. And it's a very similar process as what he's describing here. All right, so that's what he says. Now comes the next step. This must be taken carefully and all details fully worked out. To build up a faulty magical personality is worse than useless. Worse than useless. Ace says, check. Yes, I've realized that being able to literally check yourself, breathe, and truly focus on your symbol and the essence of what you're working with, just for a few moments, so you can have a legit transmission. Yes, yes. So here comes the next step. This must be taken carefully and all details fully worked out. To build up a faulty magical personality is worse than useless. It can cause quite serious trouble under certain circumstances. So the apprentice magician should most carefully consider what he is doing and patiently carry out the routine training. Divine Ultra Instinct, peace. We have already said that this artificial magical personality must be fully under the control of the magician's will, and should not be allowed to manifest in any way except when the conscious self so wills it. Also, when the purpose for which it was summoned forth has been fulfilled, it should be positively dismissed by the operator and returned into the subconsciousness. These 2 points are of the highest importance, and anyone who attempts this exercise without having developed the power to control the manifestations of the magical personality is simply asking for trouble. The exercise should be started by the operator selecting some object which is to be closely identified with the magical personality which is to be constructed. A ring is one of the best objects for this purpose. A symbol made of metal may be worn as a pendant over the heart, but since this is the position in which the magical breastplate or layman is worn, the ring is the better object of the two. In various grimoires or books of magical instruction, great stress is laid upon the virginity of the various articles used in the rites. This simply means that the object should be one that has not been used for any other purpose, and one that has, therefore, no association links with other things and no magnetic charge which would link it with other influences. It is also laid down that the operator must make and consecrate his own magical instruments, and it is certainly a very good exercise for the operator to do this, as it implies a concentration upon the article which will be far greater than that which could be exerted upon a ready-made article. But since it is not so easy to make a ring, at least not easy for those who are not mechanically minded, a shop-bought ring certainly saves time. If, however, the ring is bought at a second hand, it will in all probability be charged with influences from its past history and will therefore be unsuitable for our purpose until it has been magnetically cleansed and charged. In all cases, whether the object chosen is new or second-hand, it is recharged with the idea, held firmly in the operator's mind, that when this ring is put on, the magical personality is assumed through that action, and when it is removed, then the magical personality is put off and returned to the subconscious levels. Again, it is repeated. The magical personality must never be assumed except at the conscious command of the will, and for these training purposes, such assumption must be keyed to the deliberate action of putting on the magical ring. The ring has been placed upon the finger, and the operator is now about to assume the magical personality. How is this done? Let him see for himself as an actor assuming a certain character in a play. It is not necessary to visualize any particular form, but simply to think and feel himself to be that character. In the beginning of this exercise, he has 3 character parts to play, and his routine training should be so arranged that each of these characters is used in turn. At a later stage, the 3 are fused together into the one magical personality, but it is necessary to develop each aspect separately before attempting such a fusion. So are y'all with it so far? Do you understand what he's saying here? We're dealing with an ultimate personality that is the fusion of the essence of power, love, and wisdom. But you have to first take the time to experience the essence of power, love, and wisdom. And once they have been evoked, or I should say invoked, you combine them into an ultimate entity. That's why it's so important to not skip that first part that he mentioned. Our apprentice magician has already carried out his basic meditations on the 3 aspects of life: power, love, and wisdom. Now he will take one of them and try to think and feel as if he were the physical embodiment of that aspect. It is more than probable that most people would choose the power aspect for a start. And this, of course, is very natural. But the next time the magical personality is assumed, the aspect chosen must be one of the complementary aspects of love and wisdom. This rule must never be broken or relaxed in any way until the fusion of the three aspects of the magical personality is complete. Even then, it will be found in practice that one or the other of the aspects seems to predominate when the magical work is being done. And the integrated magical personality will be found to be temporarily biased towards such an aspect, the aspect evoked being related to the type of work being done. In the exercises, the apprentice should think, feel, speak, and act as if he were the channel and expression of the aspect chosen. Since speech is important, it is advisable to carry out this exercise somewhere where there is freedom from interruption. A simple ritual should be devised by the operator, and this ritual should be performed with the idea that he is identified with the magical personality, that he is it, and every thought and feeling should be directed towards this one end. A way in which this can be greatly intensified is to use the ring as an auto-hypnotic device by turning it bezel inwards and quietly contemplating the symbol engraved thereon. At the same time affirming the intention of assuming the magical personality, since at the present point of training the operator is not attempting contact with any other levels of being, but is using a purely psychological technique. The Kabbalistic symbol of Malkuth, the kingdom of earth, is a very good one to use. Having assumed the magical personality, the student should now proceed to the controlled use of fantasy, i.e. the image-building faculty which he uses when he is, as we say, daydreaming. He should picture mentally a number of characters engaged in doing some particular thing, and from the standpoint of his magical personality, he should put himself into the fantasy and see and feel himself as one of the characters. Thus, we will assume that the wisdom facet of the magical personality has been adopted by the student. He builds up his fantasy, shall we say one in which a number of men and women in an office are apparently in a glorious confusion because of lack of method. The student in his magical personality steps down into the picture and brings order out of chaos, organizes and systemizes the work that is being done by the actors in his little mental play, and then retires from the picture, leaving the situation balanced and coordinated. You see that? He's showing you how to do path working with this. He's showing you how to use these three initiates, cough, cough, and blend them into one. The thrice great, the triple great. Somebody heard it. Should the power facet of the magical personality have been assumed, Then a situation is visualized in which power is seen to be absent, with resultant non-action. The student in his power personality steps into the picture and applies power in a balanced form, thus energizing the static conditions visualized in the mental picture. I know what I'm about to do when I finish this live stream. I don't know what y'all about to do. I might hop on Netflix or something, but I know what I'm gonna do. I got some path working to do. You heard? Similarly with the love facet, it must always be kept in mind that this is not only a mental exercise. It should bring in all the appropriate emotions, not only in the magical personality, but also in the actors on the mental stage. Once the technique has been mastered, it will be found that although, as will be seen, the magical personality is dismissed from consciousness and returned to its place in the subconscious, it will, nevertheless, continue to operate indirectly upon the normal consciousness. For this reason, it is a very great help in the building up of the balanced Earth personality. I know what I'm gonna do when I finish this book read. That again. Once the technique has been mastered, it will be found out that although as will be seen, the magical personality is dismissed from consciousness and returned to its place in the subconscious, it will nevertheless continue to operate indirectly upon the normal consciousness. For this reason, it is a very great help in the building up of the balanced Earth personality. Again, the student is warned that the direct expression of the magical personality should always be under the full control of the waking consciousness, and its evocation and dismissal must always be voluntary. At the commencement of the exercise, the magical personality should not be assumed for longer than 10 minutes. At the end of that time, the operator should visualize a silvery veil behind him and magically see the robed and hooded figure of the magical personality pass through it and disappear. The ring should be taken off and put away, and the operator should stamp once on the ground, thus asserting symbolically that he has returned to normal everyday consciousness. The success or otherwise of the exercise should be noted down in a diary kept for this purpose. The magical personality should then be dismissed from memory until the exercise is again due. Once this technique has been learnt and the magical personality stabilized, the time of the exercise may be lengthened. But by then the operator will have commenced some, at least, of the elementary magical rites and will know how long the magical personality must be assumed for the work in hand. It should be clearly understood that the magical personality must be used throughout any ritual operation which is undertaken. It forms also the basis of the so-called body of light, which is used in the magical operations of astral projection, or, more accurately, the operation of rising on the plains. Yay! Give yourselves a round of applause. Give yourselves a round of applause. Oh, 11:11. Nice. Perfect timing. Thanks, Anna Molly. wow. Outstanding. Outstanding. Thank you, thank you. Okay, so we just went through part 3. The magical keys. We talked about magnetism, right? Which is essentially prana. Now, objectively, we can call it magnetism. Subjectively, it results in our emotions. So, if you want to raise your energy, what did he say here? Stir the emotions and the magnetic flow increases. Induce the magnetic flow and the emotions arise, right? So that's one piece of useful information, right? That's something definitely that we all can work with and use right now. Emotions and prana go hand in hand, right? Emotions and prana go hand in hand. So what else do we learn about as far as these keys, these magical keys, right? These magical keys. In the next chapter, we learned about the Tattwas. Now, he briefly touched on the Tattwas and the Tattvic tides. This can go very deep, but just basically, he let us know that the influence of the sun upon the earth and the moon upon the earth causes energetic seasons, right? So just like we've got summer, winter, spring, fall, there are also energetic seasons that flow with these Tattwas. And these are all linked to our etheric body. Now, that doesn't mean you have to wait for a certain time to do a certain ritual, but it does go to show that depending on what season we're in, it will have an effect on your emotions and your work. But ultimately, these Tattwas are the body of Prakriti. And they are what conditions consciousness. Outside of Prakriti is consciousness. But as long as we exist in the manifest dimension, we are influenced by Tattvic tides. Meditation on the Tattwas is a great way to balance some of that energy within yourself. Next, we begin to talk about the body of light. And this is essentially how to give yourself a competitive edge when it comes to astral projection. Now, remember, the physical body, you're well acquainted with. The astral body, believe it or not, you're well acquainted with. The issue is that it gets lost in translation. When we're awake, we're in the physical. When we're asleep, we're in the astral. But we typically don't bring that information across the barrier. It gets lost in translation because we're working with two different operating systems. Now, the etheric body, right? The etheric body is in between the astral and the physical. So working with that magnetism, that prana, those Tattwas, the breath, working with prana, you can serve to build a connecting link between these two bodies. Now, this will have a resounding effect in your dream work and your magical work in general, because the etheric body is the prana maya kosha, the body of energy, the vehicle of energy, right? And let me tell you something. This is just like exercising any other skill. You can be really, really good, and if you stop for a while, you're going to have to pick yourself back up. That doesn't mean you lost it. That just means you got to work your way back up to where you were. Now, it'll be a little bit easier for you than somebody else who's just starting out. But this is what I'm saying. Don't think because you got there, you're done and you won. No, you can fall off. You can fall off. But you can get back on. Just because you fell off, this is the second part. Just because you fell off, that doesn't mean you have to stay off. You can get back on. Right? So the etheric body is the body that connects almost like two arms, one arm holding on to the astral, one arm holding on to the physical body. The etheric body connects the two, right? So we talked about the body of light, dealing with these magical keys. Then we finally wrap this up with the magical personality. And this magical personality is almost like you building a conception of your higher self. And you're doing so by focusing on three aspects, these three initiates, right? Power, love, wisdom. You individually invoke those three forces within yourself. You individually invoke the essence, right? Now, if you gotta say a prayer to it, if you gotta invoke, oh, the great power of the volcanoes and the earthquakes, if you gotta go through all that, that's fine. It isn't the words, right? When we talk about invocations, it's not the words. It's about you mustering up an understanding and appreciation of the energy you're working with. So you've got to muster up an understanding of power. You've got to muster up an understanding of love. You've got to muster up an understanding of wisdom. Take the time to do this. Now, as you do this process, the next step is combining those three forces into one, right? This magical personality is the very essence of power, love, and wisdom combined. And as you build that aspect of self, and you can anchor it with a physical object, right? He gave an example of a ring. Maybe you've got something like this. Use whatever you have to use, right? But build up that personality so that you can go into it during meditation, and over time you build a relationship with it. And I'll tell you this, it doesn't stop there. That's actually the beginning. That's the beginning, because you cannot come into a direct relationship with your higher self unless you develop the body of light and the magical personality. Why can't you? Because your brain can't even conceive, the ego can't even conceive it without you first conceiving this as stepping stones. You don't just come into a direct experience and it's just like you meet somebody on the street. This is something you have to work your way up to, right? Nobody in your life is just going to walk in and show you how to do it or show you what it's like to connect with your higher self. You literally have to build your way up to it. And that's what this process here is all about. You don't just become your highest God form because you say so. You have to actually build it with the right tools, equipment, and the right ingredients. Right? You don't just become your ultimate God self because you feel like it one day. Man, fuck it, man. I'm God. I'm God. No, you're still working with the same stuff you were working with last week. So you got to start something new. And that's what this is for. That's what this is all about. And that's what, that's what we should be getting into, honestly. All right. So I hope that you guys got some good stuff out of this. For real. I hope that you got some wisdom out of this. Bing bong. I hope this brings some positive confirmation. So I'm about to wrap it up. Head out. This is for you. This is for those who like to pop the trunk and let it bump. This is for those who like to pop the trunk and let it bump. Bump. And I'm always says, Trav, if you don't call your avatar your Travatar, you miss it out. I'm off to build my Travatar. Hopefully you do the same. All right, so that's that. This was fun. I love doing this. We'll do it again next week, so chime in. We'll finish this book, and remember, we got through the first one. This is the second one. There's one more in this series. And that is, of course, Apprenticed to Magic. That's the follow-up. So stay tuned, stick around, keep watching these videos, keep doing the work, and you'll find that you are light years ahead of everyone else claiming that they're doing the same thing. Oakley dokley. Easy peasy lemon squeezy. This is TK Trav, aka Travis Magus, here with LVX777. I love you guys and girls. I appreciate you. And I hope that you have a fantabulous week end or whatever. Good night. See you on the astral plane.